Welcome back, and now on to our first conversation of the day. We're looking at Igbo philosophy, revisiting or deviating from the Igbo philosophy. And our guest is joining us via Zoom. He is a professor of philosophy. He's recorded as the father of contemporary African philosophy. He's a scholar and an activist as well. His name is Emeritus Professor Uzodimma Nwali. Good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, lady. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. All right. Can you give us an overview or just what the Igbo philosophy is about? What are the tenets, of Igbo philosophy?
Well, Igbo philosophy is like any other philosophy. The difference is that at this stage we have been articulating it. We've been dealing with what we call the traditional fields of Igbo philosophy. That traditional fields contains most of the principles which they explore through scientific methods. More so through the highest level of scientific method. The Igbos, as come to be known in history, are part of the original stock of human beings in the world. They were there for Egyptian philosophers. We could read about it. They were there before philosophers. And traces of Igbo thought, philosophy in our language as well as been traced even the Igbo philosophy has to do with our view of the world, our view of reality, how we understand our place, cosmic system, how we understand the cosmic system. It is not so much of what people regard as superstition. Was a white man who followed and tried to be great at civilization. The Igbo philosophy has to do with the fundamental principles of reality, the creation of the world, how the world came about. What is the structure of the world? What are the basic principles of the world? What's the place of man in the entire cosmic system? These are so much fundamental issues of the world. Trying to deeply explore our exchange.
In what ways is the Igbo philosophy rooted in things like oral traditions and cosmology and proverbs and things that actually make up the Igbo as it is?
I'm saying that the Igbo philosophy has to do with the understanding of existence, understanding of the origins of the world, structure of the world, functions of the world, principles of social life, human existence, all the things we study, what we call cosmology, cosmogony, on this. Also basically the values of existence, the nature of social organization, nature of human value, what is good, what is right. All these are content in fundamental systems. Find them in our folklore, find them in our social practices, we find them in the existence of the organization of our society, we find them in our religious institutions, the so-called shrines. All these are embodiments of the movement of ours. You may also know that what of the people's is there is, we wonder to see. Yes, modern science can also after that do. But on the side, yes, forefathers were able to do change physical change on something without touching it, the kind of things they will do. Our forefathers were able to prevent from there. Our forefathers were able to move constructions. Somebody can come to the divine essence. That's what the wonders we have lost as a result of the civilization. Just let us do the foreign aspect. Lead us to the fundamental principles. We are foreigners.
All right, now how would you say that colonialism and education modernization has challenged or altered when it comes to traditional Igbo values and philosophical values?
Let us look at the most tragic aspect of the education we have here. That tragic aspect is to see that philosophy began in Greece. When that is challenged, makes assertion that we began in Greece. They know that satisfied many great actors. Even Egyptian civilization has civilization in Igbo Africa. If you read the books by Patrick Achalon, with very wonderful institutions where she tried to trace fundamental elements of traditional thoughts, traditional principles, traditional concepts in the Chinese, Russian language. So the Igbos have been there. We were there before Adam. So the problem we have today is that we are made to think that the world began with the coming of the white man. That everything we have today is solid white man. No. The white man himself has the origins of their own civilization from Egypt. And Egypt has it from Sudan. So when we remember the fundamental basis of our existence, what we should do today is to try and go back to the fundamental ways in which faith for the white man. Take for example, we have to go back to the ways our forefathers organized our society. Right from childhood, from the conception of the child, to the birth of the child, to the teaching and working of the child, to the 8th grade organization, to the moonlight song, to the dancing clubs, to the family practices, where most of our our marriage ceremonies, to our burial ceremony. All these fundamental principles forgotten and we followed widely. In more recent times, I was quite happy to see some of our reverend fathers and sisters participating in Igbo cultural festivals, participating in the dancing and dance ceremonies, which are conducted according to the fundamental principles of our tradition. Today, our youths have lost contact with the origins. They are no longer initiated in basic values of our society, the basic principles of our country. That is part of what we are suffering today. Our society is becoming more and more violent. Yet, incidentally, the white man does not forget the fundamental origins. We remember what happened in the burial of Queen Elizabeth, but found that traditionalists in England carried some lamps, some shrines to go and conduct some sacrifices as part of the burial of the Elizabeth. They have not forgotten them. So I think it is necessary for us today to go back to the fundamental origins, to the way our forefathers organized society, to our burial ceremonies, the way we settle disputes, a communal legal system, the way we shared assets, settle disputes, discipline, the way our women were organized, the way our youths were organized. We need to go back to those areas. We need to go back to the fundamental system and fundamental authorities in our society. I've talked of leaders of Junior Congo. All these are of our traditional society. We should go back to them. We should not forget them because being driven by what is serve as origins.
All right, now talking about going back, to our traditional roots. Now, in recent times, you've seen cases of young people talking about going back to their father's religion, and we also find situations whereby, in the pursuit of material success, a lot of people are also going back to the traditionalists and traditional religion. Now, would you say this is a case of revisiting or a case of deviating from what the Igbo tradition is all about?
A good deal of it is the case of deviating. Let us look at the way our children today pursue money making. They pursue money making without values, even at the risk of sacrificing human lives, at the risk of committing all kinds of crimes in order to make money. That is not original with us. I remember my own father was the priest of the goddess. He was also head of community's justice system. Tried all kinds of crimes from youth, crimes committed by the youth, by the women, punishments, various forms of punishment, fines, including banishment, including even death sentence. Our society was, I would say, pure in a life sense. They have fought all kinds of crimes, all kinds of business. Their wealth must be acquired honestly. And if you do, they give them title. They don't give title to criminals. Before they give you title as a rich man, they must know the source of the wealth. So we must find a way to come back to those fundamental ways and people organize society. And get back to how we organize our youth, including the cultural activities that make youth life meaningful. What I'm talking of is I'm talking of all those moonlight songs and plays, all those dancing clubs, all those hunting clubs, fishing clubs, every organization, all those forms of apprenticeship as well as all those marriage initiation ceremonies. We must find a way to recover them and try to build them up in the ways we develop our children.
All right, now let's look at the leadership system, among Igbo people. And we know that Igbo tradition has a system of things like title taking and kingship as well. Now, how would you say that political leadership among Igbo people in our world today has deviated from, the original idea of what it means to be a leader, leadership by merit and by wisdom? How would you assess the current state of, the Igbo political leadership today?
There's no doubt that we live in a very chaotic world today. Chaotic world which has been molded by the political order, by the political system. Crime has become a mood, the principle of acquisition of wealth, acquisition of honor, of men. This was not so, as I said, in the days of our forefathers. For you to play a role in society, you must know your background. You must be an honest man. For you to to recognize and respect a society, you must have some titles. You must have title of right, title deriving from their if you are a farmer, you must belong to the cause of the organization of the young title here. I am an SAG. If you are a young man, you must belong to an organization of this. If you are a woman, you must belong to an organization of women, and you must be respected by other women because they see leadership roles. The same thing happens with the elders. You must belong to the for society, SOAD society as well. So our traditional society was organized on basic values and respect was the role we play, the honorable role, spiritual and the moral role we play in society, but not because of wealth. And if you are wealthy, there must be the source of your wealth before you respect your money. So today we are driven by Western materialism, which has really destroyed our society, which has made our society a criminal society, which has made our politics a system. It's unfortunate what we have today. There's no social order, it's a chaotic order. And of course, incidentally, you can see how even our people cooperate with those that are coming in to destroy our Fulani. There is collaboration between some of our leaders. Many of our leaders depend on the Fulani for their political position, for their political authority. So we are now with forgotten our background, our roots. We must find a way to go back to our background.
All right. And now looking at religion and spirituality, when it comes to Igbo traditional spirituality, do you think that both Igbo spirituality and Christianity can coexist philosophically? Because sometimes it seems as if the both religions or the both spiritualities have some conflicting values, and in our world today we find people who are also in the religious space, Christians and also traditionalists as well, or believe in some parts of the Igbo tradition. So do you think they can coexist, and how?
Some time ago, I attended a ceremony, as I said before, where I saw Reverend Sisters and Reverend Father dancing with the tool of traditional burial music, traditional burial music. I know some of them have also taken title, traditional title. I know also that some of them belong to various organizations in their communal societies. Now, you see, it is true no society is pure. Our traditional society has its own problems, its own challenges, but it has a mechanism for purifying the society. It has a mechanism, with fundamental principle to make sure evil does not coexist with goodness. Evil people were points in society. It had honorable leaders of these were the custodians of our society, of the values of our society. We don't have them again today. What you have today are people who are pursuing wealth, people who can see the way they run from one political party to the other. They want to join the political party. They are no longer capable. You don't have politicians anymore of any value, of any honor. When we have a politician who want to be rich by all means, who want to take titles because of the money that they get various corrupt ways. So I think it is possible for even the contemporary Christianity to coexist with traditionals, insofar as Christianity recognizes the fundamental principles embedded in our traditional society. Doesn't look at it as superstition. Obviously, there are some superstitious elements in our tradition. There are also superstitious elements in Western society. We can also join the superstitious elements and hold on to the fundamental values that can make human society more honorable more what living, not the kind of thing we have to do.
Yes, and I would like you to please speak more on, the demonization, or should I say the idea of traditional practices being diabolical, because there is this notion or this perception of people who practice traditional religion being termed as diabolical. So can you speak on that?
Like I said, I have seen some priests participating in traditional rituals, various ceremonies, naming ceremonies, that to taking place and so forth.
Can you hear me?
All those more fundamental values. Are you getting me? Hello?
All right, please go ahead. Go ahead. I can hear you.
All those traditional systems were embedded in fundamental values. All those societies have their principles and values. You dare not engage in any crime, in any crime, and still be welcome, be honored, whether it is organization of young girls, organization of youths, organization of women, organization of men, of titled people. All these we have their fundamental values and principles. Members must respect that. If you are found deviating from those fundamental values, you are punished.
All right, now let's look at
society.
All right, let's look at the role language plays when it comes to preserving Igbo cultural identity. I mean, in recent times, you also have situations where we find the younger ones or the younger generation not knowing how to speak, their native language. Now, how in what way or what role exactly does language play when it comes to preserving culture and, Igbo philosophical identity?
Language is the embodiment of the culture of the people, of the visions of the people. It also expresses, identifies negative elements which society contains. Language is such a rich thing. It's either expressed in direct sentences, or expressed in proverbs, or expressed in idioms, or expressed in folklore. Expressed in parables. There are very rich forms, language, which embody the values of our society. So I believe that those people who teach Igbo language to them should not be more concerned with just the plain syntax of sentences and so on. So they must also interested in the embodiment of values, embodiment of our history, embodiment of our culture, language. That is the way the youth were brought up in those days, in moonlight place, in cultural organizations, in educational organizations, and so on and so forth. Society has various ways of educating and bringing up young ones according to the fundamental values of society. It's also in those countries that dirty and negative values are condemned and exploited. So today we must challenge our language teacher to try and be also interested in those aspects of our language in folklore, in parables and so on, which embody the fundamental principles of our society, of our life.
All right. Speaking on, folklore and how language can be used to pass. Now, with the rise of, like Western and digital education, most of these teachers don't even know, or most of these parents don't even understand these proverbs and these folk tales and these parables that are supposed to be passed down to the children to teach them not just the syntax of their language, but also other things that make up the Igbo ideology. So now, how can, you know, these things still be passed on and it will still be understood generations to come, because it seems like it's been lost already?
Incidentally, the older generation was able to articulate our language in basic forms. There are certain very great literature which were created by some of our elders. Peter Wana, who wrote Omenoko, and other books, conveyed fundamental values of our society. Omenoko was once used. There are other writings, one by the source. So I think we have to go back to those forms of literature that convey values, convey history, convey all those things that make our society worldly human society. We must get back to them.
But do you think that globalization is a threat of some sort to, you know, Igbo tradition as it stands now?
I think globalization has its values. It also has its limitations. Globalization is negative when it tries to expunge fundamental principles and organizations of our society. Those fundamental principles and organizational facts, which we know preserve human society, make human society meaningful, make human society spiritually and morally upright. Those elements should be preserved, and we should not allow globalization to erode them. Make reference to forms of educating the youth. Forms of those organizations and those forms of education embodied in the very fundamental principles which you don't encounter in globalization. Globalization is important in the areas of enhanced scientific knowledge, enhanced technological advancements. Incidentally, as I said before, some of the fundamental technological and scientific principles we have today, our forefathers knew about them. I remember one of our great scientists, Professor Nwali, who once told us that science was moving to the point where it can predict events 1,000 years before they happen. That knowledge, that form of reality, that form of element was also available in our society. What you call soothsaying, what you call divination, those are forms of penetrating reality. You see some of them manifest today in various forms of technology, internet, and so on. Our forefathers were way ahead of a good number of things which we have today discovered as new forms of communication or interacting with war, of knowing about reality. So I believe that we have to be very careful, you know, how we look at the various forms of modernization. I mean, a good deal of society. Today, you and I know that our society has become bankrupt because of the negative forms of modernization. Our politics has become bankrupt. See the kind of government we have today. See the kind of what is happening among our youth get rich quick. We must find a way to arrest those things. And the only way to arrest them is to try and go back to the fundamental ways our forefathers tried to sanitize society, try to bring up their children as honest people, dignified people, honorable people, and hardworking people.
Okay, now speaking of revisiting, the Igbo philosophy. Now, in your opinion, what exactly does it mean to revisit Igbo philosophy? Do we mean, is it more of preservation or a reform or full, restoration or bringing back everything in its entirety? So just shed more light on the idea of revisiting the Igbo philosophy.
Well, I am an author of a book called Igbo philosophy. And that was a book that enabled the world to really believe and believe the Africans have philosophy. And I went on to introduce the teaching of African philosophy, university. And from there, it became a global mode of study. African philosophy became a respectable area of study in the world through my humble efforts. What I think we need to do is to patiently look at the way our forefathers conceived the world and compare them with the way modern science conceived the world. In many cases, we find equivalence. In many cases, we find that what the Western science has enabled us to do is to be more mechanical, to reach that reality in a way everybody can see. But in the case of tradition, a good deal of it was a function of spirituality, a function of inbuilt spiritual, intellectual, high-level intellectual perception. World. It was not so much mechanical. The mechanical aspect, there, right, techniques of modern science and service. But in doing it, we should not be carried away. We must not lose sight of the fundamental values that underlie knowledge, underlying knowledge, underlying tradition, underlying occupation, underlying lifestyle, underlying marriage, underlying bringing up our children, underlying the way society organizes itself and purifies itself.
All right, and while we're talking about revisiting the Igbo philosophy, can we also throw light on what other current practices that show clear deviation from what the philosophy, represents?
Well, I would say the various forms of get rich quick practices, various forms of ritual making. Many people have converted traditional religion, traditional philosophy into maybe a mockery, made an instrument of deceit. When you some things are used ability today, you have to make money quickly without really history. On gambling, those ones are not part of our culture or tradition. But people, they must know the source of their wealth. And the making of money was guided by certain fundamental principles of truth, of honesty. You don't cheat your parents. You must be honest in trade, you must be honest in family, you must be honest in relationships. So I think we have to get back to the way society emphasized morality, emphasized values. That is the problem of modern society. That modern society has gone bankrupt. It's now who you are, the kind of name you have, the kind of title you take, doesn't have to do with the fundamental values, how you've acquired your wealth, how you have made your name, and how you are using those opportunities to make society better.
And speaking of deviating, when we see, just like we mentioned earlier, about how we find people in pursuit of material success, they go overboard to certain religious practices. Now, do you also think that, the traditional concept of what we call nsani, which is abominations or taboos, do you think it is still very much active or still feared, or do you think it is now a situation where it's actually people have no regard for it anymore, and so they go ahead to, do these atrocious acts in the name of tradition?
The problem is that even the study of tradition is no longer taken seriously in our formal educational system. It's no longer taken seriously in our educational system. That is a part of the problem. If we do it, we'll be able to know the limits, how to draw the limits, how to identify honest endeavor, how to identify corrupt endeavor. There were corrupt people in traditional society, and the traditional society has a way of purifying itself. There are systems of making sure values are encouraged. Honesty is encouraged. Honesty is part of the organization of society. And today, we don't have, nobody cares about it. Within a religion, Christianity has lost grip itself, lost grip of itself. And all kinds of people now use Christianity to make money to the sick people, to commit all kinds of crimes, including human sacrifice as well. The only way we can grow this is to make sure that honest elements in Christianity, honest elements from society, join hands in recreating modern society. There are honest Christians, there are honest traditional people who still live. The best way to go about is to start by emphasizing those fundamental ways tradition tries to purify itself. Those traditional ways tradition organizes itself. The youth must be organized. And there are multiple principles and forms of organizing the youth. Young women must be organized. The women must organize themselves, not necessarily as members of Mary or Agnes. Women of Black community who are here to preserve religious, moral, whether Christian or traditional values of the society. To make sure women live well, women grow honorably and become honorable mothers. So we must find ways of ensuring fundamental values are embedded in our social life.
Now, in what ways would you say that we can effectively, transmit our culture down to the younger generation without sounding too archaic? Because, some youths or some young people are of the opinion that some of the tradition of Igbo people are a bit outdated or too old, and it's not practical in our modern world. So how do we transmit our culture and our traditions without, sounding too outdated or too backward?
I think where we have to start is examining what we call modernity, what we call as a civilization. and also identify the things we identify as engaged, identify as backward. We'll find them both in modern Western society. You also find them in traditional society. But traditional society was stronger, has stronger embedded mechanism for purifying itself. There were various organizations have codes and rules for purifying themselves to execute women multiple types of people. Today, most of the modern organizations we have, the only values they expound is values of wealth, taking various names and titles to where they live. And if you find people, they're taking titles, it's a lot of their honest. It's a result of their experience. Even when they, some of them that in some forms of participated, they lose to buy the people, to deceive the people, and they put themselves on the people. It's not that much, it's not the kind of selflessness which you find in tradition.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Emeritus Professor Uzodimma Nwali. Thank you for, having this very enlightening conversation with us this morning.
Thank you very much, young ladies. Thank you very much. I hope you understand that I hand on it, able to deeper principles, deeper ideas, and what I've tried to
All right, thank you so much. And that is it for our conversation on revisiting or deviating from the Igbo philosophy. And we'll go on a very quick break, and when we return, we'll continue with our conversations of the day.
Signature TV. News in your pocket.